Welcome to the Office of International Services Online Orientation Series. In this first part of the Online Orientation for Optional Practical Training, or OPT, you will learn what OPT entails and which criteria you have to meet to be eligible to apply for this work authorization. After watching this part, you should be able to answer some initial questions regarding OPT, such as the eligibility criteria for OPT and the difference between the two forms of OPT, pre-completion and post-completion. Optional practical training is a benefit of your F1 visa that gives you 12 months of work authorization in a job related to your degree level and field of study. The purpose of OPT is to engage in employment during and or after your academic program. USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, is the entity which reviews your application and adjudicates OPT. If approved, USCIS will issue an Employment Authorization Document, or EAD card, with specific employment eligibility dates. Pre-completion OPT is the option to apply for your OPT work benefit before you complete your academic program. You as the applicant may decide how much time you would like to work under the pre-completion OPT benefit. The time you are authorized for pre-completion OPT is counted against your 12 months total allotment of OPT. Part-time pre-completion OPT deducts from the 12 months total at a half-time rate. So, if you use 2 months of part-time pre-completion OPT, you would have 11 months of full-time post-completion OPT left. Most students are eligible to work part-time using this benefit. Some master's thesis or PhD students may be eligible to work full-time. Please visit the OIS website to find the eligibility details for pre-completion OPT. Both pre-completion and post-completion OPT require a recommendation from the OIS office and an application submitted to USCIS for review and adjudication. The review process may take up to 90 days, so it is important to plan ahead. In Part 3 of this orientation, we will explain exactly how to apply and which documents you need. The eligibility criteria for OPT are: you must be in good F1 status, you must have been enrolled full-time for at least 1 academic year and have good academic standing, you must have obtained the recommendation of your academic advisor and OIS, you must not have worked for more than 12 months on full-time CPT, you must not have applied for OPT in the past based on a degree which is the same level as your current degree. You receive 12 months of OPT per degree level. And you must seek employment in your major field of study. A job offer is not required in order to apply.
In Part 2, we will explain the different time limits to adhere to when applying for OPT, how to determine your program end date, and how to set your start date for post-completion OPT. At the time you submit your OPT application, you will receive a new I-20 which will reflect your correct program end date. The program end date is determined by successful completion of the required coursework and varies based on the type of degree program. For undergraduate and master's non-thesis students, the program end date is the last day of the final required semester of enrollment. For master's thesis students and PhD students, the program end date can be the last day of the final required semester of enrollment or the scheduled defense date. The defense date must fall within the semester. If it is scheduled outside the semester, the final day of the last semester of enrollment must be used. Once you've determined your program end date, you can start to plan your OPT application. Your window to submit this OPT application to USCIS is 90 days prior to your program end date at the earliest and 60 days after your program completion date at the latest. Please note that USCIS needs to have received your OPT application prior to the 60th day after your program end date. In Part 3, we'll go over the details of the application process. But when determining your timeline for applying for OPT, make sure to allow time for your academic advisor and OIS to provide you with the recommendations you need to apply for OPT. USCIS usually takes between 60 to 90 days to process your application. If you filed your OPT application in a timely manner, you can stay in the U.S. while your application is pending. The OPT start date must be within 60 days after your program end date. The specific date within the window is up to you to determine. A common problem occurs when you file your OPT application after your program completion date has ended. For example, if your program end date is May 14th and you submit your OPT application on July 10th, your start date still has to fall within 60 days after May 14th. USCIS can then take up to 90 days to process your application, but does not adjust your start date. Since you cannot work without your EAD card, you'll lose OPT time. You are authorized to start your employment in the U.S. once you have your EAD card in hand and the start date on the EAD card has passed.
In Part 3 of the orientation, we will go over how to prepare and submit your OPT application. In Part 4, we will cover being in F1 OPT status, how to travel, types of employment you can engage in, applying for an extension of your OPT, and other things you need to know. The first step to take is to complete this online orientation and successfully pass the quiz at the end, or attend one of the in-person sessions with an OIS advisor, which are held throughout the semester. Then complete the advisor's recommendation form, which needs to be approved by your academic advisor. You can find this form on the OIS website. Next, read and sign the OPT mailing and responsibilities form, which you will also find on the OIS website. These two forms, along with the quiz results, need to be submitted to OIS to process your OPT recommendation and issue a new Form I-20 for you. Further instructions regarding the quiz will be provided at the end of this session. This is a sample of the advisor's recommendation form. In the top box, you will fill out your personal information and indicate in the highlighted area whether you are applying for pre-completion OPT or post-completion OPT. Then in Item 1, you will indicate your program end date. In Item 2, your current GPA. If you have a graduate assistantship, Item 3 should be completed by the payroll representative in your department. Please note that you are not authorized to work on campus beyond your program end date. If your program end date falls during the regular academic semester, make sure to check with your department before applying for OPT. You must honor your assistantship commitment. Item 4 only needs to be completed if you are applying for pre-completion OPT and should be completed by your academic advisor. The bottom section of the form asks for the signatures. As you can see, for undergraduate and master's non-thesis students, the signature of the academic advisor is needed. For master's thesis and PhD students, the signature of the director of graduate programs and the signature of the thesis or dissertation chair is required. The following list of documents is needed for your OPT application. A check or money order for $380 made payable to the Department of Homeland Security. 2 passport photos. Make sure that your passport photos meet the requirements by visiting the Department of State travel website. Form I-765, this is the application form for OPT. We will show you how to complete this form during this session. Form G1145, this is the form which gives you an e-notification once the USCIS Service Center receives your application. Photocopies of all previous Forms I-20, photocopies of the I-94 card, the front and the back, a photocopy of your most recent visa stamp page in your passport, a photocopy of the identification page and expiration page of your passport, and photocopies of any and all previous EAD cards. The Form I-765 is the actual application for employment authorization that you need to submit to USCIS. You can find this form on the USCIS website at www.uscis.gov. After opening the form, you start out very easy by skipping the first block on the form. You start by selecting your reason for applying with this form, which is the first box, permission to accept employment. On line 1, your family name should be in all capital letters. Your first and middle name should have one capital letter and the other should be lowercase. Line 2, the other name section, only needs to be filled in if you have ever used another name officially. No nicknames should be included here. On line 3, your address must be an address in the United States and it should be valid for at least 3 months from the time you file. If you anticipate that you will move while your application is pending, please list the address of someone close to you that you know will not move. The next 6 lines will be self-explanatory. Under item 9, if you do not have a social security number, you will leave this line blank. Item 10 will ask you for your alien registration number or I-94 number. If you have never applied for an EAD card before, you will not have an A number. You will list the number on your I-94 card. Make sure to enter all the numbers on this line. Question 11. If you have never applied for employment authorization with USCIS before, you will answer no here, and you will skip over the next 2 lines. If you have applied for work authorization before, you will answer yes, and you must complete the following 2 lines. You will list the service center where your application was processed, and the date on your EAD card, or the date of your approval or denial notice. And on the next line, you will indicate whether or not your results were granted or denied. Again, if you have not applied for work authorization with USCIS before, you will leave these lines blank. Line 12 and 13 are the date and place of your last entry into the United States, and they can be found in your passport stamp. On line 14 and 15, you will indicate F1 student. Item 16 asks you to provide the eligibility category. For OPT, you will fill in C, 3, B. Item 17 is only completed if you are applying for the 17-month STEM extension. The last part of the form is a certification section. Here you will sign and date and provide your telephone number. Make sure your signature is in pen and fits exactly in the space provided between the 2 lines. Once you have gathered and completed all of the documents listed, please come to OIS on Monday or Thursday at 9:30 a.m. with all of your paperwork. An advisor will review your application with you. Within 3 to 5 business days, you will receive your new I-20 form with OPT recommendation. Once you have this form, follow the instructions on your mailing instructions and responsibilities form to submit your application package to the USCIS Service Center for processing. You will receive a receipt notice from USCIS in the mail 2 to 3 weeks after submitting your application. This notice has your case number. You can use this case number to check your case status on the USCIS website.
Part 4, your pending OPT application. In Part 4 of this seminar, we will answer what you can and cannot do while your OPT application is pending. We will answer questions such as, what is your status while your OPT application is pending? Can you engage in work or study while the application is pending? Can you travel abroad? What if you do not finish your degree, but you have already submitted your application? What if you need to change your mailing address? What is your immigration status while your OPT application is pending? As long as you have made sure that USCIS has received your application prior to the 60th day after your program end date, you are maintaining your F1 status and you are legally allowed to stay in the U.S. Can you engage in work or study while your OPT application is pending? The answer is that after your program end date, as indicated on Item 5 of your Form I-20, you are no longer authorized to work on campus. As for your studies, if you are a master's thesis or PhD student, you may continue to work on completing your thesis or dissertation. You may not be enrolled for any course requirements for your degree program. Master's non-thesis and undergraduate students should not be engaging in any further study-related activities. We do not recommend to travel outside of the U.S. while your application is pending. Your I-20 is no longer valid on its own after your program end date has passed. traveling without your EAD card and job details will not grant you entry into the U.S. To re-enter the U.S. while you are on OPT, you will need your valid passport, visa, I-20, as well as your EAD card. It is also highly recommended that you bring a job offer letter with you or evidence that you are actively looking for a job. If you do not finish your degree requirements as you had planned and you need additional time to complete it, please contact OIS immediately. The earlier you contact us, the more options we have available to you. The consequences vary based on your degree program. For undergraduate and master's non-thesis students, if your OPT has not yet been granted and your program end date has not yet passed, we can petition USCIS to withdraw your application and allow you to resubmit it once you finish your degree. If your program end date has already passed and your OPT has been granted, we can no longer extend your program. You can work part-time until your degree requirements have been met. They need to be met as soon as possible. For master's thesis and PhD students, this scenario would only apply if there were unfinished course requirements left. We highly recommend that you fill out an address on the I-765 form, which will not change during the processing time of your application. It does not necessarily have to be your own address, but it needs to be valid for at least 3 months. If there are unforeseen circumstances due to which you need to change the address your EAD card would be mailed to, please file Form AR11 on the USCIS website and submit it. Also, contact your OIS advisor to request a change of address be submitted directly to the service center processing your application. The reason for the latter is that the AR11 is sometimes not processed in time before your EAD card is mailed. This could result in your EAD card being returned to the service center as undeliverable and can result in serious delays in your receipt of the card.
Part 5. Your OPT has been granted. In this section, we will discuss the main things you need to know while you are working on OPT. After your OPT has been granted, you have your EAD card in hand, and the start date on your EAD card has passed, you are considered to be in lawful F1 status if you meet the following criteria. You are employed full-time, that's more than 20 hours per week, in a job related to your field of study and degree level, and you do not accrue more than 90 days of unemployment time during your 12 months of OPT. You are required to report to OIS when you have address changes or changes to your immigration status. You should also let us know your employment, unemployment information whenever there is a change. You may use the OPT validation form on the OIS website to submit all of these changes to us. We recommend that you continue to maintain your health insurance while you are in the U.S. However, you are no longer required to have health insurance. Therefore, you do not have to provide OIS with proof of health insurance while you are using your OPT. You are eligible to travel during your OPT if you are re-entering the U.S. to resume or begin employment. We do not recommend to travel if you do not have employment. You will need the following documentation: a passport, valid for 6 months into the future at least, a valid F1 visa, an I-20 recently signed for travel by OIS, an EAD card which is valid, and proof of employment. Please note that if you decide to leave the U.S. while you are unemployed, the unemployment accrual continues. You are still only entitled to 90 days of unemployment, regardless of whether you are in the United States or not. You may take classes while on OPT as long as they are incidental to your full-time employment. If you decide to pursue another degree, your OPT will be automatically canceled once you commence your new degree program. Please contact OIS if you decide to pursue another degree with NC State University, or if you decide to transfer to another university for your next degree program. OPT cannot be reclaimed once granted to you. You are only eligible for 12 months of OPT per degree level. All employment types that we will discuss here are subject to the criteria that the employment must be full-time and must be related to your field of study and degree level. You can engage in paid or unpaid employment. For instance, work on a volunteer basis, or unpaid internships are eligible. You may also work for multiple employers or work for short-term multiple employers. You must maintain careful records of all employment, including the dates and duration of employment. Work for hire is work where an individual performs a service based on a contractual relationship rather than an employment relationship. If requested by Department of Homeland Security, you should be prepared to provide evidence showing the duration of the contract periods and the name and address of the contracting company. You are also eligible to start a business and be self-employed. You should be able to prove that you have the proper business licenses and are actively engaged in a business related to your degree program. Employment through an agency or consulting firm is also acceptable. For any type of employment, make sure to keep careful records of the duration of employment, the job description, and the number of hours you have worked. After your OPT ends, you are entitled to a 60-day grace period, during which you may not engage in study or employment. This time is meant for you to travel within the U.S., wrap up your affairs, and leave the U.S. You are also eligible to apply for a change of status to a different immigration status during this time if you so choose. If you decide to leave the U.S. prior to your OPT end date, please notify OIS by submitting the departure form. OIS will then close your F1 immigration record accordingly.
Part 6 will give you an overview of the 17-month STEM extension of OPT. Once you have been granted and are engaged in OPT, you may be eligible to apply for the STEM extension. You must have a degree in a STEM field. STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. If you're not sure if your degree is eligible for the STEM extension, please visit www.ice.gov/civis/stemlist.htm. You must be employed by or have a job offer from an E-Verified employer. USCIS must receive your application for the extension prior to your current OPT end date. The STEM extension gives you 17 months of additional work authorization, which gives you a total of 29 months of OPT. The application process for the 17-month STEM extension is similar to the application you completed for your initial OPT. You will start by completing and submitting the STEM OPT extension and application form to OIS, along with a copy of the offer letter from an E-Verify employer. This offer letter must include job title and description, a statement saying that your job is related to your field of study, along with a statement that the employer is E-Verified. The offer letter should also mention the number of hours per week, which should be at least 20 hours, and the work location. Upon determining eligibility, OIS will then issue a new Form I-20 for you with the OPT STEM recommendation on it. You will need to submit both the offer letter and the new I-20, along with all the other application materials. Please refer to the OIS website or the application part of this session for the list of documents you'll need to gather. In addition to those documents, you will also need to include an official transcript showing degree completion or a copy of your degree certificate. Make sure that this document lists your degree level and your field of study. You may submit the application up to 120 days prior to the end date of your current OPT. USCIS can take up to 90 days to process your application. As long as USCIS receives your application for the extension prior to the end date on your EAD card, your status and work authorization in the U.S. are automatically extended until you receive a decision. This extension is valid to a maximum of 180 days after the end date of your current EAD card. In this part of our session, we will discuss the H-1B Cap Gap extension. The H-1B Cap Gap extension is an automatic extension of F-1 status and possibly work authorization for an individual who is currently on OPT and whose employer has timely filed for H-1B status that will go into effect October 1st. The extension is intended to bridge the gap between your OPT end date and the start date of your H-1B. No application is necessary for this extension. A couple of important notes for you about the Cap Gap extension. Your work authorization is only extended if the H-1B was filed during your OPT time. If the H-1B was filed after the end date on your EAD card or during your 60-day grace period, only your F-1 status is extended, not your work authorization. You do not need a Form I-20 to prove your Cap Gap extension. However, if you or your employer would like to request a Form I-20 to show the extension of status and work authorization, if applicable, you may request this from OIS. Please submit a copy of your H-1B approval notice, I-797A, to OIS for this I-20. To access all the forms you need and find detailed background information on everything we have presented to you here, please visit the links listed here. Should you have additional questions after reading this information, please contact OIS at 919-515-2961 or email ois@ncsu.edu. On the first link, you can also find the OPT Frequently Asked Questions section with extra explanations. We hope this session has been helpful to you and leaves you well informed of your future work authorization options.
To make sure you understood everything correctly, we ask you to take a short quiz. The quiz is located in Moodle. Please log into Moodle using your Unity ID and password. Enroll for the OIS Online Orientation Series Optional Practical Training course. After enrolling, you automatically arrive at the main screen, then click on the quiz link. Your score will be visible immediately after you take the quiz. If you have a passing score, print the page and bring it with you when you come to submit your OPT application at OIS. If you failed, please go through the material again and retake the quiz. Your OPT application will not be accepted without proof that you have completed and passed the quiz. Good luck!